Hi, I'm Lia Ramu. Welcome. This is Teacher Talk.
Hi, everyone. This is episode 9 of How to Talk to Teachers, Teacher Talk, a series of webcasts and podcasts where I bring in some really forward-thinking education leaders to help parents navigate school systems and advocate for their children in partnership with educators. Our topics have included well-being, AI, technology, all that stuff that are really issues that are facing our children in our classrooms today. And we're here to try and help you understand and support your kids as they soar in who they are and in their learning. So today, I thought we'd learn about another one really big, important topic, especially in the spirit of Christmas. And it's not only important for our classrooms, but also for our world. And not just Christmas, all holidays. I want to step back here and make sure that we're being very inclusive, because that's the topic we're going to be addressing today, inclusion and diversity. So the word diversity and inclusion, these are words that get thrown out a lot. And it's a big endeavor to really practice them so that we can create these more equitable, fair, supportive environments, especially in our workplaces, schools, and our broader communities. So together, these concepts work to create spaces where differences are celebrated and where people of all backgrounds thrive. And we want diverse groups represented meaningfully and engaged and supported, because we know that many voices contribute to more powerful, more robust situations and solutions that are respectful for all. So how do we define these big things? Like, really define them, diversity and inclusion, and how do we integrate them into our environments with kindness and compassion? Meet my guest, Tammy Webster. Tammy, this is a big one. I'm so glad to have her here with us today. She's of Anishinaabe of the Kitigan Zibi Algonquin First Nation. And Tammy, please stop me and, of course, help me out here if I'm getting anything wrong, because I want to be respectful of you. Tammy is currently seconded as a director of equity for Let's Talk Science and was a previous Indigenous education and equity consultant in the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. She has a deep understanding in Indigenous ways of knowing and leads systemic changes in educational structures. She has a Master of Arts in Education from York University, a Bachelor of Education from the University of Western Ontario, a Bachelor of Arts in Literature and Leisure and Bachelor of Arts in Leisure and Recreation Studies with Business Option from the University of Waterloo, and a Bachelor of General Science from the University of Waterloo. Wow, okay, so you've done a lot of school. I thought I did a lot of school, but it's just another way how we connect. You and I connected over the love of the Eagles and maybe punk rock, but we also love school. Love to learn. So she's spent so many hours contributing to community service, and I can't list them all, but we'll include them in our show notes. And she was nominated for the KW Oktoberfest Woman of the Year and received the Recognizing Excellence Award for the Indigenous Professional Association of Canada. My God. And in 2024, she was awarded the WXN Canadian Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Leader Award. Okay, so we've got the right person here to help walk us through this. She's got so many lenses, and she's going to teach us so much, and I just think she's really cool. Somehow, in all of this, she's found time to work on boards and committees where she really presents the voice of an urban First Nations person to ensure that voice is presented and heard in decision-making. She relies on her circle of knowledge keepers and elders for input in areas where they offer more in-depth knowledge and understanding. And I love this. They help her remain grounded in decisions and ensure that the vision for the future generations remains positive, which is really cool, and healthy, and includes that Indigenous lens. She firmly believes that systemic change results from a positive and professional relationship built on acting and engaging as a critical friend, understanding how oppression impacts systems and systems changes, and through a partnership that brings people together. That's a lot. I would say that Tammy's really cool and her heart's in the right place, but I wanted to make sure she was represented in her own words. So thank you for sharing that, and welcome, Tammy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And to be honest with you, I love that last part of she's just really cool. That resonates with me.
Really cool. She's cool, and she's smart, and she's kind, and she does wonderful work. What else is there really? Really, what else is there at the end of the day, Tammy? So thank you for being here. And I'm going to just kick it off with some really simple questions. From your perspective, with all this incredible background that you have and all this knowledge, and just for who you are, can you help us define diversity and inclusion? What are we really talking about here?
Well, I think for me, a lot of what I do is I try to go to the root or the simplest version. Like, I don't like things getting diluted or covered or anything like that. So when I thought about diversity, I kind of wanted to jump right away to what it's not. And I'm like, no, let's flip this around, Tammy. Like, let's go back to what is diversity. To me, it's variety. Real simple, right? We've always had diversity in our worlds for, hundreds of thousands of years. And it's a variety, shapes, colors, sizes, ways of doing, ways of thinking, ways of interacting, how we move. And to me, that's, very simply diversity. And if we keep that in mind, I think we can start to recognize that it's not this bad word.
Overused word. That's becoming diluted, right?
Yeah. Or the saying of this, it's now become a position as opposed to, well, there's actually people associated with that. Mm-hmm. And the same idea with inclusion. And for me, with inclusion, I right away went to a couple of different thoughts on it. And I'm like, well, again, let's narrow this down to what it really is. And to me, it's really about, you're part of something or something is part of something, right? And that's that sense of bigger, you're part of a community, you're part of a structure, you're, in that, whether voluntarily or not. To me, that's what inclusion was. And then I'm like, okay, well, are we using it as a verb? Are we using it as a noun? Right? The teacher part of me. And again, that can have, I guess, different outcomes. And again, toying with some ideas I had, I'm like, well, how often have we said, you're shopping, hey, there's a 10% discount included with the sale price. Well, that's inclusion, right? Or, to say, hey, as a Costco member, because, I got to go to Costco later to load up, with your membership, you are included as a Costco member to, go buy the, 100 pack of toilet paper, so to speak. So to me, that's kind of really what I want to kind of simplify that idea of diversity inclusion to be, right? Variety and having a connection to something.
Ooh, that's what I was going to talk about. So two things. I loved how you introduced it as shapes, sizes, and colors. So if we give a little allegory to that and think of a box of crayons and a sheet of paper, or teachers, this is where our minds go. You give a kid one crayon, one color, one crayon, and one piece of paper, as opposed to a box of crayons, types of paper, different colors of construction paper. The end result is going to be much more captivating. So if we look at it in terms of that variety, that spectrum that we have access to within our spirits, when we're trying to find solutions to something, that variety that you talked about becomes so much, allows for a product or an end creation, because I don't like to use the word product, but a creation that is that much richer.
Yeah.
And that is the real beauty of diversity, right? So I know corporations have used it because we want to, appeal to our diverse customers, all that great stuff. Schools are using it quite nicely now, but I really want to make sure that our viewers understand that this is a call to a connection, now we're coming to connection, of our spirits, because it's about connection, right? And without connection, where is our humanity?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Makes sense. Wrapped up, sealed. There you go. We're done.
We're talking to myself here because I know we're so on the same page. I think this is so important as humanity moves into a new way of being, and we have the opportunity to practice what we talk about in deeper, more meaningful ways. And I know you understand this. And this is just something I want to get out to our viewers. I just think it's so important, especially in the spirit of the holidays, especially really to be kind to one another, to see one another, to help heal each other, and to include one another. So we are a big box of crayons as opposed to one, or highlighters or markers or pets or crayons, whatever, or paintbrushes. I'm an artist, so I love to use those images. But I wanted to ask you, Tammy, what brought you specifically to this work? Because I know how passionate you are about it.
Yeah. And I've been asked that question on different interviews, I guess, over my tenure as an educator. And I would say, I think some of it started with lived experience, right? As a kid, I am First Nations, but I'm very aware of what I look like. I don't fit the stereotype, or I don't look like what a lot of my friends and relatives do. And so I was able to see the world a little differently, through the white codedness and also through my own family history and lived experience and knowledge and stories, and to say there's something different. As a kid, huge sense of social justice and fairness. I didn't, kind of like through therapy, or like, oh, that's what I was like as a kid. You didn't realize in the moment. But on hindsight, I used to get really upset about people being mistreated. And I couldn't quite vocalize why or, what led to the mistreatment. But I always had that sense of fairness. And I think over time, as I got into education, for me, it was always around, how do we help those who perhaps don't always have the same opportunities? Or how do we coach that? How do we encourage that? And so I think, through my careers, well, I'll kind of backtrack and say, I didn't want to be a teacher. I really didn't. My mom was a teacher, and I saw what she had to do, and I saw all the work and commitment. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be a teacher. None. Zero. And refusing to be like your parents. But over time, I take a look at all my part-time jobs that I had, and I was always in that kind of coaching, mentoring, teaching, right, throughout. And I was kind of like, I guess, maybe I should be a teacher. And so kind of bringing me back to that work of like, the kids I always worked with, or the people I always wanted to work with, were the ones who perhaps didn't see themselves in that field or what we were doing, were people who just needed things explained differently, or someone who said, hey, I'm trying to do this idea, but I don't know how to bring it to life. And I'd be like, hey, I got an idea. Let's work on this. So for me, I always wanted to, I guess, empower other folks, and I think as teachers, a lot of us say, we have that, I guess it's kind of like that moral calling of why are we trying to do it? And for me, when I kind of got into education, I was like, you know what? I have anywhere from, 20 to maybe not 20 anymore, but you can have anywhere from 20 to 30 kids in front of you for 8 to 10 months a year. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity to make an impact, to maybe be a shining light for some kids. And I thought, that really is a calling for me. And so, as an educator, that's what I started to do. And then as you learn the systems, you say, hey, you know what? If I can work with 4 other teachers or 5 teachers, and give them coaching, mentoring, instruction, while they also now have 20 to 30 kids. And so it starts to ripple out, right? So I guess a lot of that really was just my own backgrounds, my own understanding, saying, as an educator, you have a lot of power and a lot of influence. Like we can see history around that, like the residential school is knowing the impact negatively, but we can also look at it positively and say, wow, you have these kids or you have these students in front of you. And so I guess what brought me to this work is that real sense of, let's all look at who's in front of us, and kind of like you were saying earlier, and realize that they're humans, realize that they're people. And my First Nations background said, a lot of this is some people say circle, I say in community. And if you look around your circle, well, they're there, right? What happens to one part of the circle can actually impact way down the road for that other part. And so I think for a lot of me, this work really is about saying, I want to do this differently, because for a future, as a way to kind of make I don't know if it's make amends, but perhaps set a new path forward from past, and to be part of that and say, I contributed, here's how, I gave it my best, and it's now yours. Figure out what to do with it, right? Just like we do as educators. Here's your tools. Keep going. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got it.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And I was laughing and smiling. We're not laughing, smiling broadly, because I think we were some of the same tribe, cut from the same cloth. I had the exact same experience in terms of not wanting to be a teacher because my mother wanted me to be a teacher. Yeah. Yeah. But just like you, I have an innate calling to be a teacher. And I think it's a gift, really is a gift that we get from our students. So we are receiving gifts as a teacher because, and I say this a lot, that we are in service of our of our students, and we can learn alongside them and with them and more about ourselves. And also the sense of justice as a child. And now maybe it has something to do with astrological sign. I don't know. I'm a Libra, but I feel very strongly about that. I hate it. I can't stand it when I see somebody that's not included or treated unfairly or treated unkindly. It makes me nuts. So I am very much called to this work of diversity and inclusion as well. So we both have this lived experience. Maybe that's why we connect so deeply. And I'm also I'm learning more and more about Indigenous ways of being. And I think that's something we can all learn and integrate into our systems very gently, because it calls to me. And I think it's amazing. And I'm just so glad that I know you and others that can help me be better and learn more and in simple little ways. Yeah, gifted for all of us, for all of humanity. So thank you for sharing that. I applaud the work that you're doing. And I'm like one of your fans. Well, thank you.
For sure. Yeah. Well, actually, and I'm going to kind of jump in on you and go off script here. And I also like to kind of qualify a lot of this work by saying that while the other person or the party is there, we have to respect their boundaries. And one of the things I've noticed a lot of folks, saying, well, I put all these things together to create a sense of belonging or inclusion, but they didn't want it. And they're like, well, part of this work has to be done in community with other people or in collaboration with other people to say, well, do you want to be part of this? What can it look like? Because I think when we start talking about sometimes around inclusion, there are some communities that I know I don't belong to or even should be included to. Because if we're insisting and inserting ourselves, well, that comes with privilege and power. And that can be an issue. So I always say, a lot of this work has to be done respecting boundaries as well. And someone's willingness, it's kind of like kids, right? If a kid has said, don't talk to me, I'm really angry and I'm not doing math, well, we got to kind of respect that boundary, right? And reapproach it. So I always kind of like to put that out because, I certainly don't want to say, hey, let's push for all of these great things when we haven't really maybe chatted with the other side to see what they want to.
You know what? That is such an important perspective. So this is why I love doing this teacher talk episode, because I always learn from the really smart people that I bring on. And I never thought of it that way. You're absolutely right. And I know that, you were so helpful and so kind. You help, with how to talk to teachers. I can't thank you enough for that. And one of the things that you said when I was writing the chapter that you helped me with is not to romanticize things.
Yeah.
Right? Not to, sure, we can all do that, but we have a sense of other, and the boundaries that you've talked about really changes the framing of what could all be unicorns and rainbows. Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is we're here to learn and grow, and that's not always unicorns and rainbows. And we have to be respectful of, if I'm getting this properly, of where people are at. Yeah. And not forcefully insert ourselves where we're not welcome or where we don't belong ourselves. Yeah. But in respecting that, we are practicing this gentler, kinder way of being that is inclusive. Yep. Does that sound fair? Does that sound right? Am I capturing that correctly?
I think so, right? Because we're also respecting their diversity of how they do things and where they're at and what they want to do, right? It's that variety. And if we kind of keep that in mind, what makes up? Like I remember a long time ago, you might remember this, there was a big initiative with kids around, what's in their backpack, right?
I do.
Yeah. And it was always talk about, and then that idea of filling up buckets and all this sort of thing. And I've always said, we don't know what's in that backpack. And it's not, we can ask politely, but it's up to the backpack owner to decide what they're going to do. And I think, but we go back to, well, what's in that backpack is going to be very diverse, right? There's a lot of variety. So I like that real simple definition of diversity is variety. There's a lot of things. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe it's just one big thing. And everyone's backpack will look different, So if we keep that in mind, like you said, keeps that humanness
Completely.
kind of front and center.
Yeah, because the last thing we want to do is insert something in that or impose something like that backpack that in person does not want.
Yeah.
It's a really different way of looking at diversity and inclusion. to really cool. I'm going to keep saying, you're so cool.
Thanks.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way. So that's going to really be integrated into the way I look at diversity and inclusion in a much more respectful, laid back kind of way. Because, I wear red. I'm a strong character. I come on because I'm excited and I want to help.
Yeah,
but sometimes helping means just pushing back and letting others be. And that's kind of Indigenous ways of being as well, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it's that sense of circle, right? What's that?
Yeah. You're like, yeah. And
right. Yeah, we checked that box now. Moving on.
With your permission, I just want to be very clear that I have had your prior permission to talk about neurodivergence as well. So we've got this Indigenous lens and a neurodivergent lens as well. And there's a lot of talk about being on the spectrum and being not a disorder, right? It's not a disorder, and it shouldn't be not neurotypical people shouldn't be accommodating neurodivergent people. Maybe neurotypicals. How did I get that wrong? There should be accommodations for neurodivergent people should be making accommodations for neurotypicals.
Right?
Switch that. It's not a disorder. It's a way of being that I think it needs to be respected and included.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's okay, go ahead. Sorry, I keep cutting you off now.
If you're okay with it, to talk about diversity and inclusion within the context of neurodivergence, because that's something that's so important right now, I think.
Yeah. So I'll kind of back this up a little bit. As a teacher, I loved working with kids who were ADHD for some reason. And I kind of look back and, 20 years ago, there would only been a very small population that had the formal diagnosis. But, and I you learn so much in hindsight, right? In hindsight, I was like, probably there were a lot more kids who had ADHD or have ADHD, but didn't have a formal diagnosis, right? And it was always those kids that I kind of, gravitated to. And they're the kids that tended to gravitate towards me. And I found, there's times where as a teacher, I would do things in my classroom that sometimes I get my hand slapped for, saying, well, that's not, professional. That's not this, right? But for me, it goes back to that teaching of, hey, I'm going to remember that every kid in front of me is a little bit different and this is what they need. And, kind of step out of the norm of that colonial, using my air quotes, Western way of teaching. Right. And so, and then even being First Nations and Indigenous, I would often do things differently. That role of storytelling, that role of being able to rely on classmates or community, right? Or even just being understanding and saying, what are we really learning here? Do you need to memorize this information, or is it a deeper, application or critical skill that we're trying to work with, right? And, I don't know how many times I'd say, well, especially when Google started coming out and the internet, like that's how I've been teaching, to say, is this it? Can you Google this? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, okay, that's great. I don't really want to know that because I can Google it too. Let's look at this other stuff. And kids with ADHD, well, I think a lot of neurodivergence, don't always want to know the facts and figures. They want to get into it, really get into the deep thinking and the application and side of things, which is where you get a lot of the hands-on or that experiential learning, right? And then they're the ones who say, oh, hey, I got a question, Ms. Webster. I was trying to do this, and this, and they're going on and they're showing you, and they're like, but I don't know this word. And I'm like, okay, well, this is when you get to go Google and figure it out, right? And it's that supportive learning, or it's kind of like student-led, experiential, teacher-supported, right? Throwing out all the terms. And that's where I found kids excel. Yeah, right? And so from the First Nations way of doing things, that's often how we traditionally taught. You worked with people, you learned experiencing. Part of the process was, let's just sit back and watch and observe. And if you ever watch the little ones in like junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten, that's what they do. They watch, they observe, right? And then over time, with comfort, they start to practice. They start to put their own way of thinking onto things. And that's a very First Nations way of teaching. And that was something that we've always taught using that model. And then also the idea of lifelong learning, right? And I think both you and I are a testament to that, saying, hey, we're going to try these other new things and learn along the way, right? So for me, that's kind of the mix of the two that work really well together. So now, here we are, 2024. And, I've already said, I remember when internet came into being. So that says how old I am approximately. Right? As I say, you can find me in, the really expensive vintage section now of LCBO, right? That's kind of my age. Right? Yeah. But I go back to now that I have my formal ADHD diagnosis, I certainly did see a lot of challenges growing up, right? And I was lucky to be a fairly good student. My current diagnosis is inattentive type, mostly, with some hyperactivity. Like, I wouldn't show you the things I'm playing with and how fast my feet are moving, part of that hyperactivity piece of things. But I was the daydreamer. Yeah, no, I use it in the last hair. A hair thing, yeah.
I use this.
Right?
It's a fidget spinner.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I do something small. I don't know. That's just what works for me when I'm chatting. See two squirrels working together. Right?
We do very well together.
I know. So I think kind of thinking back to when, I got my diagnosis, I'm like, oh, that explained a lot when I was a kid. I was the daydreamer. And then through university. Do you think I could write a paper for the life of me, like when it's handed out? No. Night before, cram, right? I was the queen of cram. And also, like going through university, I did fail some courses. I did get kicked out for a while. And then kind of saying, oh, why? Well, I wasn't interested, right? So that brain, that motivation driven, did have an impact. But I also liked learning. That's the, many degrees. Sometimes it just took me longer to finish. So when we think about kind of how some of those pieces play out and, where they've landed, I guess I can always say that's why I come back to the original question of how, what is diversity and inclusion and how did I get into it? I've lived a life of it, right? Whether knowing or not knowing. And so I think when we, broad speaking, from my First Nation side of things make sense. And I see how it fits and how it's kind of created this, my personality, I guess. I don't know who I am, my spirit, like I used to do that, like, it's kind of my core being. But I think there's a lot of other cultures out there who would have a very similar view. Historically, someone with my brain would have a certain role in a community, right?
Yes.
Or multiple roles, right? In a community. And again, it goes back to I always don't want to silo people and say, this is who you are and what you do. Like, let's open it up. Bring the variety, right? Bring the variety pack. Let's see what we can do. Right? Yeah. Or to say, you bring the crowns, you bring the paper, and you know what? You're going to bring something else that we know nothing about, but we're going to figure out how to use it. And I think that's kind of where I've landed. Now, with neurodivergence in general, it was kind of quiet for a long time. You had to have certain very specific behaviors. And I would say maybe 5 years, maybe even 10 years longer. I just got caught up in the past couple of years because, got the diagnosis. But it's only more recently that we're seeing the research. We're seeing the, brain scans. We're seeing how behaviors can impact. We're understanding that this neurodivergence is really about brain development. And what does that mean? And, people are saying, well, it's always been around. We're seeing history of it. But sometimes our science isn't caught up to what people observe. And that's kind of always my argument. Some, Western science is just catching up to, First Nations knowledge. So I always say it is different. It can be different. And part of, I guess now is the education around it, right? Like it is a deficit-based title, right? Disorder. But I also recognize, well, that benchmark of disorder is based on this very, very normative neurotypical version. And I get it, I struggle to function. I was able to make it work. I still struggle to function at times in our current systems. But I think, again, going back to that piece around diversity and inclusion, if we can create or begin to create systems, big picture, I don't know, whatever that system looks like, that reflects people who come with a multitude of, I'll say identities right now, that are perhaps different. We can actually create a system that works for a lot more people than, let me create a system for this one student who has ADHD, and I'm going to put Band-Aids on my current system just to accommodate. Well, we know Band-Aids don't work. Well, they do, but they're not a long-term solution, and they're not sustainable, right? Especially, you got a 4-year-old who plays in the dirt, that Band-Aid is off in a heartbeat. All right. So I think for me, a lot of that really is about how do we how do we revise, adapt, adopt things that can capture more people and say, hey, here's an opportunity. And again, keep in mind what I said earlier, but not everyone wants to be there. Not everyone is going to be there, but that's okay. At least we now have an option, right? It's like working with kids. Hey, here are your 3 options. This, and this. And they can choose. That's autonomy. That comes with diversity and inclusion. They can actually choose, right? That's pretty cool. So I don't know. I kind of went all over on that one.
No, you didn't. I think you went right to the heart of it. I think what you just said is incredibly powerful. And I'm so glad that we were able to capture that in this recording, because you're absolutely right. You're absolutely. You said so many beautiful things. I was so caught up in listening that I didn't do a very good job of threading them the way I usually do when I do these things and sort of synthesize, because I was just like so into what you were saying. And it is about our systems, and it is about the way we view one another. And it is about the things, these are the things that only you could, as a person who is neurodivergent, tell the world. Because as you say, it's your lived experience. And in the book, when I talk about neurodivergence, I say that we are learning from you. We have to come to you. And the things we are learning from you are these human competencies. And you talk about Google, and I would change the word Google when you used it to a search to AI. Yeah. Now we're looking at Go Ask AI. In an AI-driven world, when AI can give us all the answers that we think that I don't want to do them with that math, miss. Remember, you just said that.
Yeah.
Right? I want to go create something. What are the things that we need to learn? And I think that we can learn this from the neurodivergent community. Kindness, the humanistic principles, the things that make us human, patience, kindness, generosity, all those things that AI can't do. Right?
Yeah.
So to include, and I know we're zeroing in on the Indigenous community, Indigenous ways, and neurodiversion, but we really have to zoom out and include everybody, because everybody's different. So when we include all of that and incorporate that into our systems, into our classrooms, again, unicorns and rainbows, the world will be a better place when we infuse this idea of respect and boundaries, because it's not going to be unicorn and rainbows. There's always going to, because everybody's learning and we're all on our own path, right? But I think you're really onto something. I think you need to patent what you just said. We need to get you back in systems when your secondment is done, and figure out ways how we can do this with real impact in our systems. Like, what would that look like in a classroom, and how would a teacher model that? Everything you just said, how can a teacher model that, and how can a parent ask for it when they see that their kid is not that one person with the Band-Aid? Because Band-Aids, you said it, Band-Aids are a stop solution, but they don't heal. The body heals. Yeah, right? We want the body to heal at this point. We want deep healing at this point. So do you have any ideas? How can a teacher, from what you've just talked about, it's so wonderful. I talk about being present, maybe, and accepting, believing, role modeling, celebrating their own differences with the kids. How do we get to be and celebrate who the kids are in a systemic way that's going to have impact? But this becomes seamless, because you talked about the kindies, right? I was going to talk about the little kids. They do this seamlessly. do we all need to go back to kindergarten? I mean, let's see.
Yeah. No, I think so. Based on our current, maybe understand kindergarten, because again, I know there's so many political moves and players and, education system. While we strive to do these great, noble things, there's so many other players. And I think in order to do this into the class, sometimes you have to be a risk taker, right? And say, I'm going to do it because it's good for the kids. Because like I said, there's things I did and I would get my hand slapped, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to, now when I do these things, I'm going to make sure that, principal's not walking around or my door's shut. So you find ways to still do it, right? I got a bit of a reputation.
Teachers, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Right? You're going to have that little disclaimer banner at the bottom, right? This is not practice. Yeah, no, it's okay. But I think sometimes, as an individual, we can say, yeah, I want to do different. I want to try different. And some of the work that I've learned is listen to people, hear their stories, their perspectives. There's some very hurt people that need to be heard. And I understand why they need to be heard, right? Like we can talk colonialism, we could talk oppression, we could talk all these big things. But to kind of dig in and I think we keep going back, is seeing the people there, right? That is their experience. It's not for me or anyone to say, oh no, that can't be true, or to downplay it. I've learned to honor that experience, whereas before I wouldn't. I was the, judgy Tammy. But because when they present that, it can give you insight into, okay, how can I do things different to perhaps change their perspective? And as a teacher, sometimes that's what you're trying to do with kids, right? It's saying, how do I change this kid's perspective? Or how do I change this kid's knowledge? So for me, I always say, listen to the stories, hear their perspective, and kind of analyze and say, what do I need to take away from this? So I always go back to collaborate, partnership, community. As both a parent and a teacher, that's another conversation. It's a really weird space to be in. And as a parent of a kid who has ADHD and is neurodivergent, we're trying to navigate those spaces, say, this is what works for me at home with my kid. And then, going to a teacher and say, can you implement this? As a teacher, a long time I used to get really territorial of don't tell me what to do in my classroom. I was one of those teachers. But I did say, you know what? If I actually have a happy parent who sees that I'm trying, guess what? They're going to help me mostly. And then I find that relationship with the parent or the adult or the caregiver actually improves. And so then you can say, okay, well, this is what I'm trying in the classroom. Can you try it at home? Or, where the child is. And when I started being open to that relationship, that community, because someone is coming with their story and their perspective, you can actually work together and build your circle, right? And I think this work really started with me putting my own ego aside a bit as a teacher, because I went to teachers college where you were the dominant, you were the know-it-all, you had all the power and influence. And I think you had said it earlier, Lia, is about it's working together, right? Co-learning, co-developing, co-understanding. I think of the word community, right? It's C-O, community. And I go back to that notion of first stages, we're in a circle. If I don't know, I'm actually going to look around the circle and say, hey, help me out, because we're all connected right now. And if I'm going to drop or flounder or step away from the circle, it's actually going to have a much bigger impact. So in the classroom, take those little things and say, what can I do differently this year? How can I ask questions of a family? How can I take time to hear their story or listen to a kid? And then what can I learn from it, and how can we collaborate and find ways to address it? But also keep in mind, we have a very short window, but we can set the foundation. We could set that first step. We could do all that cool stuff too. So,
wow. Just wow, Tammy. So blown away. I think we're so on the same page, you and I. That's exactly what I talked about in the book, how to talk to teachers, is to create these partnerships. But you brought a different layer, as you always do, in terms of listen. because of listen to the child, listen to the parent, right? Because you're right. Teachers come in with I am the teacher. This is my classroom. This is how it is run. And it is a position of power. And kids spend, I think it's 14,000 hours or something crazy from K to 12, K to grade 12 in a classroom with teachers. So I think that was such an impetus for me to write this book, basically for parents to get in on that action in a kind, gentle partnership way with teachers, not in an antagonistic way. And I love how you couch it in terms of my circle. When I don't understand, I can go to my circle. If parents look at teachers as part of their circle, as opposed to somebody to fight with, that is incredibly powerful, because again, it's about, we're all working for the same thing, and that's for the students, for the children. And we can do that work together with these seemingly very gentle shifts, but are incredibly powerful, that you have helped us unearth today in this time we have with you, very part Teacher Talk episode. Incredibly powerful, incredibly insightful, Tammy.
Thank you.
For people like me listening and going, wow, this is a really different way to think and a different way to be, kinder, gentler, in service of the kids, better for parents. Let's do it. Let's do it. I think
so. Yeah.
Because it's not end. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Because those kids are the future, right? They're the ones who are going to look after us. They're the ones who can be the game changers. They're the ones who see things that we didn't, because of what's happening in the
a lot, right? They're inheriting a pretty messed up, scary world.
Yeah, in theory,
Post-COVID, all that stuff. So we need divergent thinkers. We need diversity. We need to include everybody, because we need a box of crayons. We can't do it with one crayon. We need that.
Yeah. Or I'd even say now, I'm taking your metaphor and saying we just need a palette of stuff, right? Like whatever that stuff is. Let's just bring it together and bring the buffet. Contribute to the buffet.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite, and I use this in the book too. One of my favorite short little stories, children's stories, is Stone Soup. The story of Stone Soup, and it's about a village that doesn't have enough food, but one person has a carrot, one has an onion, one has the actual cauldron, and everybody comes and a stranger comes to town, and it's like, why is everybody hiding? And he just puts the cauldron onto a fire with water in it. Yeah. And slowly it puts a stone in it. And slowly the townspeople come on. So what are you doing? I'm making soup. And then someone contributes an onion, and someone contributes a carrot, and someone contributes a potato. And at the end of it, they all eat. Right? So the diversity of what they have, that everybody's included, everybody eats. I think that is so important right now. Like, that's why I quoted in the book without giving anything away. And what's going to get us through is diversity and inclusion, is being respectful, is being heard, right? Is listening, is being kind, all these things. And you, my dear, have brought this together with such incredible spirit, power, and insight. And I knew you would, because you're my punk rocker friend at heart.
Right? Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Tammy?
Not that I can think of. I'm sure, we find times we can shoot the breeze for hours at a time, but no, not for this topic. I thought it was great, and I do appreciate the invite and opportunity to kind of share. And I think as educators, like using your Stone Soup story, is sometimes it just takes one person to take the step. And the community just needed that, right? And I think as an educator, you can say, I'm just going to be the one person who takes a step, and hope. Like how, if you need to edit that, and you double hockey sticks, that other people are going to follow. And I suspect there will be, because we are a global community, and people do want to do things different and be different, but also keep things that make them who they are, authentic. So, And
everybody respect that. Tammy, I respect you. I think you're all that. Thank you so much for bringing your entire spirit, and your being with us for here today. You shine. You're the one that's leading out there. You've helped us, and I just think you're wonderful. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. And kind of same to you, is that you're the one who said, hey, I'm going to do this book and get it out because, you know, as part of that circle, you're like, I got a skill and I know where I can go with this skill. And at the end of the day, why are we doing this, you and I? The kids, the future. So, thank you for being my circle and my community, because this is cool.
You're the best, Tammy. Everybody,
All right.
this is the best way to end before my last episode of the year. Happy holidays. Be safe, be kind, be well. And let's practice just a little bit all of the wonderful things that Tammy has introduced us here today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.